Our focal passage for today and this Father's Day comes from the 27th chapter of Genesis, very first book in the Bible, so it should not be hard for you to locate the passage if you brought your Bibles with you, which I hope that you did. Most of you know that my first wife died of cancer almost 30 years ago now. But in the early days of our marriage, long before her diagnosis with cancer, during those days where, husbands and wives are getting to know one another, sort of measuring one another up, learning what makes them tick, that you're just learning, you're figuring out one another, so to speak. And in those early years and days of our marriage, God used her to teach me an incredibly important truth that I have never forgotten and am reminded of in a vivid way every Father's Day. One day, out of the blue, Pam told me in a matter-of-fact kind of way, "You act different when you're around your dad." Now, I honestly don't remember what I had done or what I might have said that had prompted her words that day. I'm not sure she even offered a single example or illustration to back up what I saw or heard or took as an accusation. Apparently, it wasn't a one-time occurrence. Her statement to me implied that it was habitual. It was something that I always did. I always acted different around my dad. What I do remember is that when she said that to me, I immediately and rather defiantly said, "I do not." I'm not sure why, but her accusation, or what I took as an accusation, activated that built-in defense mechanism that all of us seem to be born with. You know what I'm talking about? Anytime somebody says something to you and you take it as an accusation or a challenge, it ignites or activates something inside. I mean, you sort of get a little more air in your lungs, and you bow up a little bit, and your tone of your voice changes, and you get somewhat defiant or maybe even loud. And so for whatever reason, when she said that to me, the defense mechanism in me activated. I still remember it to this day. And so that's why when I felt that she was challenging me, I sternly said, "I do not." And as I recall, that pretty much ended our conversation. I guess she felt there was nothing to be gained by arguing about it, so she dropped it and we moved on. But I could never unhear her words. I'm not sure why, but those words lodged in my mind, and I began to become self-aware. I began to watch and pay attention to my behavior, especially when I was around my dad, watching for any evidence that there could have been even a shred of truth to what she had said to me that day. And was it possible that she could be right? Did I, could I, why would I act different around my dad was the question. And as I became more self-aware, I came to reluctantly realize that she might be onto something. I began to recognize that I actually did behave somewhat different around my dad, which in turn, as I became aware of that, became aware that my dad actually acted different around his dad, my grandfather. And it prompted me to reflect back on my childhood growing up and recalling experiences that were etched on my mind of times when my dad behaved differently around my granddad on our visits every weekend to their house. I have vivid memories of times when my dad, who was an incredibly gifted man, he could design anything, he could build anything, he could fix anything. It was amazing. He was incredible. It didn't make any difference if it was carpentry or mechanical. It didn't make any difference if it's electrical or plumbing, whatever it was, agriculture. It made no difference. He could do it, and he could do it as good or better than anyone I knew. And so he would make something or build something, design something. And he always had to carry it with us when we go to visit our grandparents, which were about a 30-minute drive away. And so we would go, and I would see him take it out of the car and go show it to my grandfather, his dad. And my dad behaved different around his dad. He was fishing for some sort of approval, some compliment that my grandfather might give him. My grandfather seldom did. My grandfather was a man of few words, and so I always sensed the sort of disappointment that my dad would walk away with when my dad didn't just go on and on about whatever it was my dad had built or fixed or designed. I began to think about it. Was there a connection between my father's behavior around his dad and my behavior around my dad? Did I inherit a tendency to alter how I acted around my dad? Was it hereditary? I certainly didn't inherit any of those other. I wasn't creative or design or mechanical or electrical, or I didn't inherit any of that. Did I inherit this tendency to act different around my dad? Well, sort of. And so did you. You see, the answer is pretty simple. My dad wanted his dad's affirmation. My dad wanted his dad approval. And so he acted different. And so did I. And so do you. Because we never outgrow that desire built into us to need and want and desire our Father's approval for His blessing. You never outgrow that. You can be an adult, father yourself, a grandfather yourself, have your own home, be a full-grown man, full-grown woman. You never outgrow the need and desire for the blessing. This is not just some psychological mumbo-jumbo theory. It's actually rooted in Scripture. From the very beginning of creation, in fact. There's a word that appears in the first book of the Bible. Actually, it appears almost in the first paragraph of the Bible, and it occurs 400 times in the Old Testament. It tells you when a word appears that many times, it's pretty significant. This is not irrelevant. This isn't just a connecting word. This is an important word. The word is bless. It's a key concept that impacts every single one of us in this room today. It's pretty important. So on this Father's Day, I want to talk to you a few minutes about the blessing. And I'm not talking about those words that you utter when you're about to have lunch or dinner. I'm talking about the blessing that we read of here in the Bible and why it's important. And there are two very important things about the blessing that I want you to walk out of here today with that you never forget. And number one is the blessing is purposeful. It's purposeful. It's not trivial. It's not incidental. It's not just another one of many things in the Bible. This blessing, the blessing is purposeful. It begins with God. It is God's idea. But I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to listen to what God's word says in Genesis chapter 1, very first chapter of the book. Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 23. And I want you just to listen. I don't want you to look at those words. I want you to listen. I want you to look at the screen and listen as I read. Then God said, "Let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water, and every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply. Let the fish fill the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." Now, get your pen and in your notes, circle these two phrases. back to back. God saw that it was good, then God blessed them. God saw that it was good, and then God blessed them. There's a sense in the absence of the blessing that causes one to wonder if they are good. There's a sense in the absence of the blessing that makes someone wonder what's wrong with them. The word for bless is so important. It is a compound word in the Greek translation. Now, I know that we're here in the Old Testament, it's the Hebrew, but the Greek and Hebrew are translations of the same word here. And it's a compound word. It depicts a positive emotion. We get our word euphoric from. You know what euphoric means? It's something that just makes you feel really, really, really good. But then the other part of that compound word means to say something good or positive, and that's the word we get our word eulogy from. You know what a eulogy is? It's what's spoken at a person's funeral, where good or positive things are spoken. You do understand that one of the hardest jobs of a pastor sometimes is to think of something good to say about you guys. Yeah, one of my favorite bumper stickers that I've ever read was we were on vacation in Florida. I always remember this, and we were at a light, and there was a car in front of us that had a bumper sticker, and it said, "Live your life in such a way that the pastor won't have to lie at your funeral." What is a eulogy? A eulogy is an edited version of your life, isn't it? You don't, a pastor or a speaker at a funeral doesn't get up and say, "Well, you know, he's a real rounder he was." You don't do that. You cherry pick, you edit, you pick out the good things, and you talk about the good things. That's the eulogy. God starts by creating, and then God blesses. And this pattern is carried out throughout the creation narrative, including human beings. God created male and female, and He blessed them. He creates us to bless us, but He creates us to bless us, but also the purposefulness of this is that we might ourselves be a blessing. He blesses us so that we will bless others. This becomes crystal clear when God talks to Abraham. It's recorded again in the first book of the Bible, just a few chapters later in Genesis chapter 12. This is what it says: "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." Abraham, "I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And all people on earth will be blessed through you." You see, God's purpose of blessing you and me is that we might ourselves become a blessing to others, an extension, the conduit through which God blesses. That's His plan. That's His design for you, for me, for us. Earlier this year in one of our Immerse classes, Curtis Coleman, while he was teaching, challenged us for a week to just walk up to folks, people that we were doing business with, where if we were waiting in a line at a checkout counter sometime, or maybe we were engaged in a conversation with somebody waiting on us, and just say, can I just bless you? Can I bless you? And he used number 6, which is, by the way, the scriptural foundation and background of the song that we just sang a moment ago, the blessing. It's from number 6. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He cause His face to shine on you and be gracious. May the Lord turn His face towards you and give you peace. And a week later, after that assignment was given, people came back and they were overwhelmed. They couldn't believe how receptive people were. May I say a blessing over you? May I pray with you? And over and over and over again, people were not only receptive, but they would graciously accept it. Why? Because we all crave a blessing. It is built within us. And what's happening in that moment that we're blessing someone else is the will of God is being laid out, played out in real life, real time. Mark Buchanan writes about a group of children who were asked what love means. You see, love is a very connected word to blessed in the Bible. They're connected to one another. Love and blessed. And when Rebecca, age 8, was asked what love was, she said, when my grandmother got arthritis, she could not bend over and paint her toenails anymore. So my grandfather does this for her all the time, even when his hands got arthritis too. And Billy, age 4, said, when someone loves you, the way they say your name is different. You just know your name is safe in their mouth. I love that. You just know your name is safe in their mouth. Those of you with children still at home, would your kids say of you that their name is safe in your mouth? Those of you with adult children, if they were asked, do they believe their name is safe in your mouth? Whose toenails are you painting? Whose name is safe in your mouth? Who would say they find you a blessing in their life? It's the purpose. It's your purpose. People always talk about, I'm trying to find my purpose in life. Let me tell you one of the basic purpose, this is it. It starts in the very beginning. God created, He said it was good, and He blessed them. And He blessed them with a purpose that we then might be a blessing, just like He told Abraham. This is a major theme in the book of Genesis that continues throughout the Bible. God's plan is for human beings to be conduits of blessing. But that plan has been interrupted and disrupted by sin, with the result being a blessing-starved people who will do almost anything in order to receive a blessing. So we act different, trying to get that blessing. We see it. It's highly evident in young children. You've seen children, some of those that seem to be most bent on misbehavior and acting out. It's easy. Why do they do that? What are they trying to do? They're trying to get somebody's attention. They want to matter. They want you to notice. They want your approval, your acceptance, your love. They want that. But because of this world that has been disrupted, the identity politics of this culture that has dismantled systematically the family as God designed it and intended, we act different in an effort to try to get the blessing that's missing from our life. We're starved for attention, starved for affirmation, and we act out. Which brings me back to my story, to Pam's insight on my behavior around my dad. I soon had to admit that she was right that day. I did act different. I acted different because I longed for my dad's approval. I wanted his affirmation more than anything. I rarely felt that growing up. Now, don't misunderstand. My dad was a good man. He was a good provider. He was a hard worker. He was very present. He was supportive. And I know he loved me. But I never felt growing up I could please him entirely. His focus, from my perspective, seemed to always be on my imperfections, the things that I couldn't ever do quite right or good enough to please him. I never seemed to measure up. And again, I go back to the fact that he's incredibly gifted. It wasn't anything he couldn't do. And somehow or the other, I think that was the bar. because he could do anything and everything. That's where the bar was, and I never could measure up. My mom never called a repairman until my dad died. It wasn't anything he couldn't handle. If it was plumbing, he could fix it. If it's electrical, he could fix it. If the car broke, he could fix it. If we needed to add on to the house, he could build whatever needed to be built. He could do all of those things. I'll never forget when he wanted me to do that. And I wish that I had gotten that gene. I didn't get that gene. I remember the summer my dad made me pull up I was 16 years old and made me pull up the Plymouth that I had bought. And he said, all right, I want you to change the brake shoes. Are you kidding me? And so I spent all day under that tree trying to change the brake shoes and finally did, but I was scared to death to drive that car after then. I couldn't do that kind of stuff. I'm no plumber. You could ask Keely. She could tell you, I've cost us lots of money trying to fix plumbing problems at our house. I'm none of those things. And so maybe for that reason, I never felt like I measured up. I never could live up to my dad's standard. And so I acted different around him, trying to fish for some affirmation or approval. And Pam saw me acting different around my dad. Why? I wanted and needed his blessing. That's the purpose of the blessing, is that we pass it on. But that brings me to the second and final thing I want to point out about the blessing. Not only is it purposeful, it is powerful. The biblical concept of the blessing continues in a graphic way in the story of Isaac and Rebekah and their twin sons. It is the focal passage on that first page. And let me just read that to you, because this is sort of a capsule of a family in the very beginning of time in Genesis. And I want you to listen. When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here and he tricked me. He has taken away your blessing." Esau exclaimed, "No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me?" And Esau pleaded, "But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too." And then Esau broke down and wept. Esau and Jacob were twins. Esau was the older. Jacob, a few seconds, minutes later, was the second. Twins. Esau the older, Jacob the younger. Twins, but as different as night and day. Esau loved to hunt. He was an outdoorsman. He liked to be out in the woods. Jacob had a more quiet temperament. He was a homebody. He didn't like to go outside. He liked and preferred to stay inside. And in Genesis 25, verse 26, I want you to listen to what the Bible tells us. Isaac, the father, loved Esau, his son, because he enjoyed eating the wild game Esau brought home. But Rebekah, the mother, loved Jacob. There is a world of hurt in that sentence, is there not? The lives of these two brothers became a fight for a blessing they could not get because Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. How do you think those two brothers got along with each other? Not very well. I wonder if the term sibling rivalry was not born right here in this home. You may or may not be familiar with this story, but either way, there's an important lesson for us to learn. Jacob deceives his elderly father, who had always favored his brother. Jacob, through deception, receives his father's blessing that was intended for his brother Esau. And when Esau heard the news, he burst out with these words in verse 38. Esau pleaded, Do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too. And then Esau broke down and wept. The devastation was catastrophic because the blessing is powerful. It changes our behavior. It changes how we act, how we behave. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And Esau said to himself, according to the scripture, Esau said, I will kill my brother Jacob. And Jacob knew this, and so he leaves, he runs, and he spends most of his life on the run in fear. This is the picture of a family that mishandles the power of the blessing that alters how we act and behave. Many years pass and have passed, and Jacob decided to quit running. And he heads home, and he learns that Esau is on his way to meet him, and so he thinks this may be it. I'm terminal. But the night before they have their meeting, Jacob finds himself in a wrestling match that lasted all night long. You may be familiar with this. An angel. Theologians tell us it was the pre-incarnate Christ who had come from heaven and wrestled with Jacob all night long. And Jacob, as the morning light began to break, he refuses to let go of the angel, and he says, I will not let go until you bless me. You see, he knew what was going on, and he also knew what likely would happen when he and his brother Esau met later that day, and he desperately needed the blessing of his heavenly Father before he met his earthly brother. And so he held on, and that angel touched his thigh, and from that point on, Jacob always walked with a limp. I want you to know that God gives us a blessing only when He defeats us. You say, what do you mean? When we recognize He's God and we're not. When we quit trying to be God. When we quit trying to be the boss and make the decisions. When we surrender to Him, He blesses us, and that's what happened to Jacob. The next morning, Jacob sees Esau approaching, and we're told that Esau ran to meet Jacob, but Jacob didn't run. Jacob couldn't run. He never walked without a limp after that day. But when Esau approached, he had compassion. Something changed in his heart. He had compassion for his brother, and he embraced him, and they kissed one another. And Jacob becomes one of the most incredible human blessers in the entire Bible after that. Genesis 49 is devoted to laying out in detail the blessings Jacob gives his own sons. 12 of them that give us today the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. He blessed them all. Don't underestimate the incredible power that comes with the blessing. And let me close with the final chapter of my story that I began with today. My relationship with my dad changed dramatically as he watched me suffer and grieve my late wife's battle with cancer and ultimate death. And after Pam died, my dad's concern was palatable. I'm quite sure that he hugged me at some point when I was a little boy. But the only one that I remember is after my wife died. He asked me often after that time how I was doing. His concern for me, I never had to wonder. His well-being, my well-being, was very important to him. And then after meeting Keely, whom I think he helped pray into my life, he dearly loved her. But shortly after we met, he himself was diagnosed with cancer, and I believe to this day he fought harder for me in those days than he did for himself. During a difficult period of time in my life, when intense and often unrelenting turbulence came my way, when many persons I considered my friends had turned against me, my dad was firmly in my corner. He stood by my side with pride in his eyes when others had only scorn and disdain. And I will never forget that. My dad died just over a year after Keely and I married, but he had passed the mantle. He did not die before he gave me his blessing. And so I stand here today, in large part the man that I am, because of the blessing my father passed on to me. The blessing may be the most powerful parenting concept in the Bible. And I just need to ask you, is there any member of your family who acts different around you because they aren't aware that you approve of them, that you love them? Are they trying to get your blessing and you keep withholding it? It is purposeful and is powerful. And on this Father's Day, I hope you will get it. Father, I thank you so much for the gift of your blessing to us. From the very beginning, Father, you offered it. You created us. You said it's good, and you blessed us. And when sin wrecked us, you sent your son Jesus as your blessing so that we might be restored and be a blessing. And God, that ought to be all of our desire in this room today. And I pray that it might be. I pray your Holy Spirit would stir every heart in this room to recognize your blessing and in turn to pass it on. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. The preacher always gets blamed for this, but you do know we started late today. Okay, I just wanted to make. All right. So if you'll get your blue envelopes out, those of you who are members, you know this is for your offering, and you can also have a prayer request that you can put here. But for those of you who are first-time guests, this is our welcome envelope. If you would just fill this out and let us know a little bit about yourself. If you have a prayer request, you can put that on the back. And in a moment, they're going to pass the buckets. I don't want you guys to pass it quite yet. Let people have a chance to fill it out. But while they're doing that, and while our ushers go ahead and get up and get in place ready, I want to tell you about two things that are really important coming up this summer. Every July, I do a midsummer Bible study, and this year is going to be on the doctrine of prayer. And initially, it was going to be on the 4 Monday nights in July, but just as recent as last night, I was able to confirm a good friend of mine who will be here to teach the last session, which will actually be 2 sessions. He wrote the book, Praying the Bible, and Donald Whitney is his name, and he's going to be here to teach us on that night. So this is something you don't want to miss. This is going to be incredible, but it'll be 3 Monday nights in July. He will be here on July 22nd, okay? But we need you to register so we know how to set up the room and have enough material, okay? So please go by out in the town square at the info bar, and Mary will be there to help you sign up. No cost to it, you just need to sign up, okay? So we do that. Guys, you can go ahead and pass the buckets. And then the other thing that you need to know about is Shannon always has a summer Bible study as well. These are on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. And in her study, it's going to all be about faith. It's going to be living our faith, sharing our faith, growing in our faith. And it's going to be 6 o'clock on Wednesday nights in July. So please go. If you want more information, Shannon's going to be out at the info bar as well. She'll be out there to fill you in on all of the details of that. You can also register for that. And again, I don't think there's any cost for that as well. Just go out there and register. We need to know for set up purposes, okay? All right, we're going to let these guys go. Let me tell you, before you leave the campus today, I encourage you to go through, if you got time, to check and look at the food bank. Take a tour of it. It's just on the verge of opening now, and so it'll give you a good chance to go through there while you're on campus, so I hope you'll do that as well. God has blessed us immensely being able to do that. We still, I think Mark said, are about $1 million short of having that building paid for, and so if you want to write a check, we would like to be out of debt on that soon, okay? All right, guys. Go buy your dad, if he's still living and still with you, a big steak today and have a good, happy Father's Day.